I'm the Scale Model Geek, and in this video I'm really keen and excited to show what I've been working on. Now, I've created something totally from scratch, starting with this tube. This is a 100mm clear tube to be used for my project. And what I've created is this awesome looking Cryochamber, which I designed in Blender. Took me a long time to actually create this, a few errors here and there, but ended up with this awesome looking thing. Also, if you really like what I'm about to show you, the creation I make, you actually get to download these files from CG Trader, and I'll leave the links in the description for you. Because I'm really still a bit of a newbie in using a 3D Blender, it did take me quite a while to create this because, yeah, for me it was a lot of trial and error. It took me about a week to design this, but the end result, I must admit, I'm really happy with. Now, this project is a huge project. There's not many parts, but they are big parts, and a couple computers in there as well. And I've also designed it so you can take this air rock, and this is what they use at the bottom of fish tanks. So if you wish, you can seal it all up with some silicone and create some bubbling effects coming straight out of it. I thought that would be a really cool idea. If you don't want it, you can put some LED lights in there. Talking about LED lights, this is the top section, and it's designed to take 12-volt LED strips. Just some greeblies on the side as well, just to add a bit of interest. And this is a creature that I created and modified heaps of it in Blender, and this will be floating in the inside of the tank, which will also be available in the files. And I'll have these crazy little wires hanging out of it as well. This figure is originally from a company called Loot, and it's exquisitely detailed. It's absolutely wonderful little figure. That won't be available. You'll have to join up Loot if you want this biotechnician. Like I said earlier, it took me a bit of trial and error to get the Cryochamber to the way I wanted. This was the original base. Now, originally I had these greeblies part of the base, ended up separating them, and you can see those side pipey things. They ended up being redesigned to make them look a little bit better and fit a printer. I also decided I might separate the three main pieces by using these plastic card sheets, and they're 1.5mm with a hole cut in the side so you can put the cabling through it. And of course, everything has to go together with super glue. Now, part of my construction, I decided to glue the base and the spine of the Cryochamber together just to make painting a lot easier rather than having separate pieces then trying to paint them. These are the piping, and you can mix them up whatever you want. You can have the smaller pieces at the front or vice versa. And for the piping, some of these 7.1mm tubing from Evergreen, who have been around for 1 billion years. And those are cut at about 120mm in length. This is another one of those projects that I've been wanting to do for quite a while now. And I'll tell you, learning how to use Blender has opened up so many options for me. I still get to play with greeblies, but it's just in the virtual world. And talking about greeblies, I also decided to add a few on the side of these top section there. Of course, with the files you can resize to whatever size you like. I didn't want to glue the top section to the rest of the Cryochamber, so I ended up drilling a hole and adding a 1/4 inch nut to the top section and the bolt that connects to it. And once the two-part epoxy glue had hardened, I unscrewed the bolt, and this just gave me the option of removing the creature or topping up the water if I need to. Off camera, I painted this black, and the reasoning for that is because I want to paint the creatures in really bright, colourful colours. I really wanted to stand out because the focus is the creature, not the Cryochamber. And a bit of gunmetal to actually dry brush the whole thing. Dry brushing it with the gunmetal really brings out all the detail. It looks amazing. I'm a real sucker for metallic finishes, just can't get enough of it. During the conceptual process, I did toy with the idea of painting it like a clinical white or even a grey colour, but as you can see, I ended up with metallic. And I love it, really happy with the finish of it. Feels quite industrial, which is what I was kind of thinking about. And some of this light metal, and I'm going to hit this with just random areas around the Cryochamber. And I'm doing this just to add a bit of visual interest to the whole unit. With all the dry brushing done, it's time to add some lighting. For the recessed area in the top section, I'm using some of these 12-volt LED strips. Now this stuff, you got to be careful where you buy from because they vary so much in price. I bought this off AliExpress, and I'll leave the links in the description, and they were really dirt cheap. And these things are really simple to use. Both terminals are clearly marked, negative and positive, and be very careful, you can only cut these at certain lengths. But again, those little lengths are clearly marked as well. Look at that, works first go. How can you go wrong? There's only 2 wires. The LED strips do have a sticky back, but I decided to add just a couple drops of super glue just to get it started. Hold it in place as I went around the circle. Now I'm constantly testing the LED lights just to make sure I haven't damaged them in one way. And to add a bit more strength in them, just using some of this aluminium foil and cutting it to shape. And then pushing it in to mold it. And this gave me some extra strength through the reflection. Bit of hot glue to keep it into place. Again, another test. And check out how bright it is. Look at this. Whoa! Looks awesome. And now onto the air stone. Once again, I'll leave the links in the description where you can get this. That particular stone is 60 millimeters, and a bit of clear silicone to hold everything into place, and also lots and lots of silicone in the back of it to make sure it doesn't leak. And I really flooded that section. I then put that aside because it needed 24 hours to dry. So while that was drying, it was onto the creature. Now I'm going to call this dude Harold, because I kind of think it looks like a Harold. The base coat, some of this alien purple, and you can see I've done the zenithal lighting on there. Originally painted it black and then sprayed it from one direction with some white. Now an even coat with that purple. I then added a bit of this chrome yellow to the colour and started hitting the highlights and also his belly. And at every stage I just added a bit more white to my little airbrush pot, and just to lighten it up, and I slowly built up his tones. Look at that, he's got some really nice contours. Now I wanted to pop out some more of Harold's details, so I ended up using some of this light sand from Ammo to dry brush his skin. And this was an extremely light coat. The dry brushing was just heavy enough to see the detail without losing the tones of the purples. Now for the inside of his mouth and his tongue, some of this burnt red. Grr, grr. For all the bony areas, including his teeth, some of this beige red from Vallejo. Harold's got quite a number of teeth and a few spikes, so it took a few minutes to do. Now once that was dry, I used some of this light sand and glaze medium. Now the reason I'm using the dry brushing light sand is because I didn't have that colour in another paint. So I thinned it down quite a fair bit with the glazed medium and just gave it a slight wash from the top of the spikes. I decided to use this electric blue just to add a bit more detail and colour to his face. Is it a face? What do you call it? Yeah, it's his face. He's got a nose, got eyes, got a mouth. Must be a face. If it's not, let me know in the comments. I'm using this violet red for the big bony bits on the back of his head and his back. And of course there's a whole bunch of bony spikes on it as well. These are the body sensors, which I painted flat black and dry brushed them with the light silver. Off camera I did drill some holes into those sensors. And check out Harold, he's looking fantastic. Really happy with the way he came up, love the colours of him. He's ready to go out on the town tonight. Now, as a last minute idea, I created this ring, and that's purely there to hide the joint between the clear cylinder and the Cryochamber. I created this twisted wire to use as the cables that go to the body sensors, and all this was one length of wire. I folded in half, stuck one end on a hook that was attached to a beam, and the other end into my cordless drill, and spun around, and it twisted into this really cool looking cabling. Now, off camera I did drill some holes into Harold. He wasn't too happy about it, but hey, he didn't have a say. Even though I used a bit of super glue on the joints, it did need a bit of extra strength, so I ended up using some baking soda in this little dispenser bottle, and you just squirt that onto the super glue and it goes really hard. This bit, that was a bit annoying because that was a bit fiddly, just to align all the cables into place. The sensors in the light section were also painted black and then dry brushed in silver. A quick test fit of Harold inside the tube, just to make sure he sits nicely and straight and none of the cabling is actually hitting the tubing. Then, using this Araldite 5-minute epoxy adhesive, I stuck that onto the ends of the cabling. Once that was all dry, I then used a Dremel tool with a cutting wheel and just chopped them off. And then to finish off the cabling, a bit of black base coat, and that's silver. Here I have some masking tape just to make sure I don't get any silicone sealant onto the actual Cryochamber, because that's really a bit of a pain to wipe off. It leaves a bit of a glossy finish to it. And a bit of force to make sure all spreads nice and evenly. I left that to dry overnight, and the next day I gave it a water test. Great news, it didn't leak. Bad news, I hated it. Because I used a tube, it created refraction, which distorted Harold, and Harold looked horrible. I had to figure out a plan B. So, while I was thinking about that, I decided to add a bit more detail to the top and bottom sections of the Cryochamber. In fact, this was very therapeutic for me to work out my issue. I eventually came up with this awesome idea. Since I can't have bubbles, I'm going to have smoke. I cut out a circle from this clear sheet of plastic. I then added a bit of PVA glue to the top and hit it with some cotton wool. Once that was dry, I then teased it out to get that real wispy look to it. And I've got to say, I'm pretty happy with the turnout. Have a look at this, that's looking awesome. For plan B, it's not too bad at all. And once I glued it into the base with some more PVA glue, I then teased it out even more. Pushed through the wiring of the 12 volt LED lights. I then used this 1/4 inch bolt to hold it all together. Now for the backing, I really didn't design anything in 3D because these are really thin. and I thought I was going to have some issues with printing it. So I just used some plastic card. That's an 8mm hole for the jack, the 12-volt jack that is. I then proceeded to cut out a hole in the midsection of it, the spine. That's a 10mm width between the edge and the center section there. And to cut that out, I just give it a couple scribes, the first one being very light and the other 2 or 3 scribes a little bit heavier. Once I scribe all 4 sides, this stuff is so easy to use that you can just bend it and it snaps out. Plastic card is so cool to use. Now to add the details within that center section, some of this are sidewalk, and all this is just a sheet of styrene with little squares in it. But it's a great looking detail. I then hit up my Greeblies box of bits and pieces and start detailing up the power section of the Cryochamber. I have no idea what this piece was, but it fitted perfectly on the top section. Didn't even have to cut it down. Now these are missile launcher thingies of jets. You know, the bits that hold the missiles underneath the wings. And a couple of tank wheels, I think they were. I think these pieces were the inside of a bomb bay or something. Something like that. But they look really cool. And there they are, all done, undercoated with flat black and then dry brush with gunmetal. Off camera, I soldered the 2 wires to the power jack. And once I screwed that into place, I did give it a coat of flat black just to hide it as much as I could. Some super glue to the base, and I wasn't planning on pulling this apart again, so I put a fair bit of amount on there just to make it quite strong, so when I pull the jack in and out, it's not going to rip the whole facade out. And this one only got a couple drops of super glue. I just had a feeling I might need to access that section a bit later on. And there's that black coat I was talking about. That hit it pretty well. Now I did end up updating these computers and changed the keyboard to some of these like glowy ball dials, because the creature that's using them isn't really human. So keyboard is really a dumb idea. Now to start off on those buttons, I gave them a first coat of some of this chrome. Once that first coat had dried completely, I gave some of those knobs a coat of this clear yellow. And that gave it that really anodized look to it. And then I hit them up with various other colours, including this clear, green, the orange, some blue, and of course we need some red as well. And there's the final keyboard, almost. We need something on that screen. So I designed these little screen images in Photoshop, and I just grabbed the 3D images from Blender, turned them into a wireframe, and just printed them out in green. I gave the screen a nice coat of PVA glue, then slid the images straight onto there. Then I used a cotton bud just to make sure it stuck on properly. Now for the final look, I'm using some of this clear UV resin and a nice thin coat over it. Once I got that nice and even, I then hit it with a UV torch for about a minute. And finally super glued the computer terminals onto the Cryochamber. And with the Cryochamber pretty much done, it was on to the base. This is a piece of XPS foam covered in general filler, or putty, and then painted grey with black sides. Now I figured PVA glue should be more than enough to keep the Cryochamber stuck to the base. With that all done, it was on to the final figure, the bioengineer from Loot. The base colour of his skin will be some of this goblin green. And I'm going to paint a very thin coat because, as you can see, I've painted the figure in some zenithal highlighting. Now I'm doing a thin coat because I don't want to lose that shading. And I really like the colour, it's a very cool colour. Now onto this electric blue for some of the colours in his garment. And it's really just the front section. Oh, actually there's a bit going down the back of him as well. The red for some more of his garment. Mainly the base area. Again, a thin coat so I don't lose any of that highlighting. Black for the final bits of the inserts of his garment. The bioengineer is starting to take some shape. He's looking good. Now some of this gold from Model Master. Now this tin of gold is like 25 years old. I've had it a very long time. But it works really well. There's no problems with it. And now onto detailing his skin. Now I'm starting off with some of this goblin green again, mixing it with some flat yellow and some of this off-white and some glazed medium as well. And I'm mixing all that together to create my highlights. And I'm just running down the raised areas of his skin, and this is really adding a bit of depth to his look. He's almost done. Just a couple little bits and pieces to do. Now some of this alien purple. The bioengineer has these blister looking things on his arms, so I thought I'll add the purple to that. I'm using some of this dark flesh tone with some medium glaze, and I've created a wash to go over the gold. To bring out some more of the detail, some of this panel line accent colour, it's the black from Tamiya, and I'm hitting the recessed areas of the gold plating. Then, talking about Tamiya, some of this gold leaf, the old X12, and a very light dry brush over his plates. I was really happy with the way the gold turned out on this. And this is what he looks like, all done. He's ready to go onto my little diorama. Well, I guess if it's a little diorama, it's a vignette. So it's just a matter of working out where to place him. And yep, I decided to put him there. And I also stuck him down with some PVA glue. Now looking at it, it kind of felt it needed something else. It was missing something. So I decided to create some barriers, some handrails as it were. So I grabbed this closed wire hanger, and the gauge of this was perfect for what I needed. And I cut up 4 even lengths of around 120mm each one. I then chopped them down with this wire cutter, and with some pliers bent them into shape. Of course I need to do this 4 times. I think that gap is about 10mm if I remember rightly. And look at that, I'm painting it flat black. I'll give you one guess what the next colour is going to be. Of course, it's gunmetal, because everything's black and gunmetal in this. And then I glued them down with some PVA glue. And the thing is, this thing was so big that you haven't had a chance to see the whole thing in one hit. So, thanks for watching, and let's check out the final video.